Hello and welcome to Full Disclosure, a podcast project which, altogether now, was conceived chiefly to allow me to spend more time with interesting people than I would ever get on the radio. And since it started back in 2019, you know that I've had some incredible guests that we are, this week and last week, revisiting, partly because I'm so busy promoting my new book, How They Broke Britain, which is published by Penguin and out now. I wanted, though, to take a moment to look back at some of my favourite guests, and Dame Prue Leith really stood out, possibly because I wasn't quite sure what to expect. I knew she was a doyenne of cookery books and that she had become, rather late in life, a star on the Great British Bake Off. But unlike quite a lot of Full Disclosure guests, I didn't know much more about her, and it turned out there was a heck of a lot to learn. She goes back much further, obviously, than her current fame, and her early life, her novels, the broadcasting, the campaigning, it all comes together like a recipe to create a glorious result. So have a listen to this. Let's begin at the beginning then. You were born in South Africa. You lived there for most of your childhood. Your mother was an actress. Mm-hmm. It's quite extraordinary childhood.
Well, it wasn't really extraordinary because, it didn't seem extraordinary to me, but then nobody's childhood seems extraordinary to them.
I guess not. But you know that no one else's mum, your mum, Margaret Inglis, was a very successful actress.
Yes, she was a very, very, in South Africa, very famous actress. And I always thought I'd be an actress because my mother was, and I loved the theatre, and I used to go to the theatre a lot. So I went off to university to be an actress, found I was completely useless at acting.
Who told you?
Well, I just sort of realised, I think. And then, so I thought, well, I still want to work in the theatre, so I swapped to art. I went to the art school. The wonderful thing about those days is if you got into university, once you were in, you could swap courses.
Right.
I don't think you can do that now. But so then I did art school for a while, and then the head of the art school did say, come and stand behind me in a life class, and said, what are you doing in my life class? And I said, well, I'm trying to learn to draw. And he said, I'd give it up now. He said, you've no talent, you might as well leave. And actually, I was quite grateful because I might have struggled on.
Actually, this is before you're 20. The doors to drama and to art have both been slammed squarely in your face.
And then I thought I'd be an architect, and I'd swapped to the architecture school, and they discovered very quickly that I had no maths whatever. And you need a bit of maths, or used to need. You probably could do it all on machines.
No, it probably helps.
Anyway, so that was no good. So finally I went to Paris to learn to be a translator. I was quite good at French, and I thought, well, if I learn from the French, I will be in the United Nations or something. And I fell in love with food.
You've leapt forward to what became your lifelong passion. I'm going to press rewind, if I may, briefly. Taught by Anglican nuns in South Africa at a time when, of course, apartheid was absolutely established. How conscious were you of the sort of political movements and the racial undercurrents or overcurrents?
Well, no, we're very conscious because my parents were very liberal. But they were only liberal from South African point of view. We still had a very apartheid. Of course we did. We had a very apartheid upbringing. And I remember when I first came to France and found myself having lunch and sitting next to black students and being friends with them. It sort of, at first, it really scared me because I had never had any social act. I mean, I was surrounded by black people, but they were mostly servants and it was extraordinary. I remember going back to South Africa and looking at it with completely different eyes and thinking, how can it be that I would, as a child, walk down a pavement with my giggling girlfriends, and venerable old black men would step off the pavement into the gutter to let us pass. We thought nothing of the fact that we sat at the front of the bus, school children, white school children. Yes. Black people sat in the back of the bus, including your nanny if you were a little child and you had. So there was this absolutely ingrained.
Because you'd never known any different, but as soon as you stepped out of it, the absurdity and the injustice of it became irresistible. Exactly.
But even I always knew it was unjust because my mother used to campaign against apartheid, and she would stand on the town hall steps, and I remember being rather sort of embarrassed by her because there were photographs in the local paper of her covered in egg yolk
Oh,
from
really?
people flinging eggs at her because, of course, the white
So
population.
it was a brave thing to do then, in a
and
way.
it was. There was a women's movement called what were they called? The Black Sash. That's
Yes.
what they were called, the Black Sash. And they used to wear black sashes, and they'd get this abuse and all the rest of it. And my main reaction as a young girl was embarrassment that my mother wasn't towing the line. I suppose I'd rather she was not like that. But so I think I was better able to. When I went to university, I started campaigning to let black students into Cape Town University, which they weren't allowed to. And I remember getting arrested and rather I'm ashamed of it now, but my main feeling was, oh, good, this will help my street cred. There are people who will realise that I really care. And actually, the police took one look at me. I mean, we all got taken to a police station and names taken, all the rest of it. And they just realised I was a fellow traveller, that I'd never done any serious rioting or anything. So they let me go.
So you sort of got arrested by accident.
Well, no,
Almost.
I got arrested for
You were there.
demonstrating. I was there. That was quite enough. But I got let go because they realised I wasn't, a mover and shaker.
Presumably, it wouldn't just give you street cred among the student body, it would have made your mother quite proud to see this.
Yeah, yes.
Most people were
She
a
would
little
have been-
reluctant to tell mum they've just been arrested.
Yeah, but she would have been torn between pride that I was doing something for anti-apartheid and terror for her daughter.
Of course.
One's principles are always compromised by your love for your family, aren't they?
Yeah, of course they are. And it's, I guess, the biggest acts of principle are the ones that hurt either yourself or the people you love the most. And speaking of the people you love the most, you leapt immediately to arriving in Paris, but those attempts at other courses, I mean, for a female student, you spoke very matter-of-factly about it, but presumably it wasn't an obvious path for a young woman to take in South Africa in that era, to go to the...
Sorbonne.
Yeah, well, even to Cape Town University. What was was it 50-50, the student body then? Or?
Yes.
Oh, it was?
No, it wasn't. It was more...
Sure.
There were less of us women, but South Africa wasn't quite the outpost that one thinks of it. I certainly felt that I had to get out of South Africa because everything that was really interesting would be happening in Paris or London or Rome or somewhere. But in fact, it was amazing for its time. I mean, there was really good ballet school. The theatre was fantastic. The good radio, and the government, although it was utterly controlling of the political situation, the justice situation, the justice department wasn't interfered with.
Okay.
It was only later, when I was about 21, that they started appointing judges who were politically, as they thought, correct, which meant, supporters of apartheid.
Yes.
But while I was a child, and right up till I was 21, they didn't do that.
So I'm struck by the idea that you thought anything was possible. Possibly with a bit of a show-off gene in there as well, because drama
absolutely.
and art are both quite exuberant.
Well,
but you felt anything was achievable.
And I think I always attribute, people say, you've been very successful, and I attribute a lot to the fact that I was treated by my parents absolutely like my brothers. There was no, the boy has to go to university. It was just expected that we would go to university. It was just, our house was full of books and poetry and stuff. Although, funnily enough, not music. We had no music in my childhood, which was a huge loss. But my parents always encouraged us. I don't remember ever being told by my father or my mother, you can't do that because it's not correct, or you can't, or it's not for girls, or even when South Africa was very free in the sense that health and safety, it still is. Health and safety sort of hasn't arrived. So we were never told you can't climb a tree, or you mustn't do that, or don't cross the road. And of course we grew up because it was a very controlled, the police were very strong and the army was very strong. For white children, it was tremendously safe. We could I used to walk 3 miles to school and across a piece of felt, and it was.
So it's natural then that you'd grow up feeling that the sky was the limit, because your childhood had no restrictions,
boundaries.
no boundaries,
not pressurized expectations. I mean, I remember when my brother was he went to university in Natal, and he wanted to be an architect, and then he decided not to be. And I remember my father saying, "It doesn't matter what you are. Why don't you go to England for a while and join the police force, or be a bobby, or drive a bus, or do something to grow up?" And I think that was their attitude. You have to be happy, but they gave us the best tools we could have to be happy, like education.
Yes, but not the pressure to achieve.
No pressure.
Which often, I think, creates people who do actually achieve a lot, because they don't feel the pressure to. You're not questioning yourself all the time.
No.
So you arrive in Paris intending to study literature.
Yeah. French civilization, it was called.
French civilization. Were you a foodie at this point? Did you love?
Not at all.
No,
not at all.
Well, that's interesting.
I mean, I was greedy. I'd always been greedy.
It's not the same thing at all.
No, not the same thing. Difference between gourmand and gourmet. I was a gourmand, and I couldn't cook anything. I was au pair while I was at the Alliance Française, trying to learn enough French to go to the Sorbonne.
Yes,
and they were just amazed. The man and the couple that I worked for couldn't believe that I couldn't cook anything.
I mean, genuinely.
I genuinely
boil
couldn't,
an egg.
I had never boiled an egg. I mean, we had
because you had
servants
staff
who
galore in
did
South
that.
Africa. Yes,
I had once or twice made jam tarts, but our Zulu cook, Charlie, who was a great cook, and I could have learned to cook at his apron strings if anybody thought of it, but they didn't, including me. I used to make jam tarts occasionally, because we had oranges and lemons growing in the garden, and I'd make the lemon curd and stuff. And he would help me, and he would clear up after me, but he never taught me, because that would have somehow been presumptuous.
Oh, gosh.
I mean, I could have been taught by him. But anyhow, when I got to France, I remember getting into a really horrible argument with my French family, who said that there was no cuisine except in France. They were very French, and they asked me what in South Africa was the national dish, and of course I couldn't think of a national dish, and I said mealies, which is corn on the cob, because that's what most of us ate a lot of. And they said, "Good Lord, we only have that. We feed that to the cattle."
It's true, isn't it? They don't.
And then I got very upset about this, and very sort of nationally. I'm very proud of South Africa. I said, "Well, I'll show you. They're delicious." So they said, "Well, they're mealie fields." Well, what I didn't realize, this was sort of late August, when all the corn on the cob had been there for months, and it was being dried in the sun in order to feed the cattle, be pounded up and made into meal. And so I went and picked a couple of these. I thought they looked not quite how I was used to, but I had never cooked one. So I tried to boil these things, and of course it just proved everything they thought, that I was hopeless at cooking.
Utterly inedible. It's not an auspicious start. Did you get homesick when you were there, or were you taking?
Yes, I was really homesick.
Were you? Because I was thinking, if you're row with your host family, that makes the sadness or the homesickness much worse.
That was very exceptional that we quarrelled, but I was just. I think I was mostly upset because what I found really difficult was not being able to properly join in a conversation.
Yes.
Because I couldn't express myself properly, and that was very frustrating.
But you must have been able to quite quickly, because you did end up at the Sorbonne.
I did learn fast, and they were brilliant. She was an amazing woman. She was the first morning I was there, she took me and the two little children to get the bread. You know how the French do first thing.
Yes.
And we went to 3 shops. We bought the croissant in one, and the baguette in one, and the Gâteau Basque. We were staying near in the Basque country. And I said to her, but all 3 of those shops sell all 3 of those things. Why don't we just go to one shop? And she looked at me as if I was completely mad.
Oh, how interesting.
They
Yes.
do the best baguette. So
and you'd never clocked that before?
I never clocked that. And the first day we did dinner for the children, I was so impressed because we gave the children exactly the same meal that we had at 8 o'clock, but they had it at 5 o'clock. They were only 6 months old and 18 months old, and the baby sat on my lap with pureed steak salad with French dressing on it, new potatoes with chives and butter on them.
Wow.
Very nicely fried little steak, rare in the middle and seared on the outside, and then whizzed up and put in a liquidizer. And the little girl sat in her high chair with a perfect plate of beautiful food. And Madame sat with us, and she made conversation with the children, and they ate that. And I thought, actually, everything you need to know about cooking is there.
Yes.
Fresh ingredients, not messed around, cooked with great care and love, and served sitting down and talking. I mean, that's it, isn't it?
Is it? Yes. And you genuinely feel that as a kind of revelatory moment.
Yeah.
Because it's clearly formative, that plus the boulangerie, the idea that there are gradations of croissants, as opposed to just a croissant or no croissant.
Exactly.
So these seeds now are beginning to sprout, these culinary seeds?
And then one more little thing I would love to tell you is that when I did get to the Sorbonne, and I was staying at the Cité Universitaire, which is sort of campus, and we had a self-service restaurant for lunch. But the French, being the French, takes foods, even students' food, very seriously. So we had little dishes for first courses in the counter. And one of them was just 3 or 4 fresh radishes, a little screw of salt, and a pat of butter. And I said to the boy next to me, "What's that? I mean, that's not a first course." And he said, "Oh, but it's delicious. It's radib, radish and butter." And I had no idea how to eat it. And he said, you grab the radish. It still had its leaves on it. Yes. It was very fresh. And you smear it in the butter, dip it in the salt, and it is absolutely delicious.
Yes, it is.
And that was pretty formative because I thought cooking isn't all about cooking. It's about ingredients.
Yes.
And I still think that's more important than anything.
Clearly. And I mean, I'm quite partial to that as well, myself, actually. My friend Andreas, who's a greengrocer, introduced me to it. Yeah. I thought he was nuts when he said, just do this and dip it in the butter and then dip it in the salt. But it touches parts that you just don't expect to be touched at all. Yeah. So you were still very, very young when you got to London. So let's just briefly move through this. Yet another door shuts in your face. You realise you're not going to be an author? What were you hoping to turn your Sorbonne education into?
I suppose a translator or something.
Okay, well, that would have been dull, wouldn't it?
Well, I didn't know that.
Well, I guess not. It depends who you're translating for, doesn't it?
Or maybe I thought, I could be live translator.
Yes, okay.
Sitting in the United Nations.
Got you, which would have been very exciting, but that wasn't going to happen either, you realised.
No. Well, I just got keen on food. And then
so I realised... that happened quickly then, as a result of being with this French family, being on the campus, being immersed in the Gallic.
Yeah, and eating really good. I mean, I discovered couscous in the street and just eating. One of the things that impressed me hugely was that it didn't matter what class you were in France, you all liked the same food. In England we have
so
food
regimented.
Is divided by class. Posh people eat all sorts of things that not posh people don't eat.
Yes.
And that's a great tragedy.
It's interesting you mentioned that. I was going to ask whether there was a class element to you not being encouraged to cook at home in South Africa, whether people from your background would always have people to cook for them. So there'd be something a little bit non-you about knowing your way around a kitchen, or not?
I don't think my parents would ever have thought it was non-you. It just didn't occur to them.
Yes, okay.
But I think there would have been. There was job reservation in South Africa about everything. You couldn't be a lift attendant, saying, 4th floor lingerie, if you were not white. So you had to be, that was reserved, driving a lift was reserved for white people. Driving a crane was reserved for white people.
Is that right?
On the other hand, bricklaying, which is just as skilled as driving a crane, was a black job. Everything was
So you were on rails, really, and it just never occurred to anybody that you might want to hop off them.
No.
But you already...
Of course, there was a few African nations who wanted to hop off, quite rightly. And and become crane drivers and lift operators and surgeons and
of course,
police.
Of course, but in terms of your expectations, it just wouldn't be. So
it never occurred to me.
And yet, immediately in Paris, you realise this is what I'm hearing now is in Paris, you moved from gourmand to gourmet. Absolutely. But you never abandoned the gourmand entirely.
No. Absolutely not.
But you're now understanding the provenance and the terroir and the importance. A very un-English thing to take to England, because presumably we're talking about very early 60s when you arrived in London, and you arrived in the London of liver and potatoes, didn't you?
Yes,
or not?
And yeah, absolutely. And everything, all the food was brown.
Yes.
Or grey.
Or grey, yes.
Grey if it was a vegetable. Brown if
making me nostalgic for my prep school.
And had sort of what one of the woman who I greatly admired, a cookery teacher, called sauce industrielle, which went over everything. Brown sauce was on everything. And food, even in restaurants, food would be delivered to you by a waiter with a partitioned stainless steel dish. And in one side of it was this slices of meat covered in brown industrial sauce. Whatever it was, it could be pheasant and it would still be like that. And then there'd be mashed potatoes and roast potatoes and vegetables all in these compartments. And you just got the same veg, whatever you'd ordered. You might be having salmon and you might be having pheasant, and you all got the same bit. And it wasn't until Nouvelle Cuisine came along, which was the 70s, so towards the end of the 70s, by the time we got it, where chefs began to look at the plate and think, what would go with what, and how does it look? And let's make it look beautiful and fresh and cook things at the last minute.
Things that complement other things.
People are rude about Nouvelle Cuisine because it's always considered a little bit of nothing on a big white plate.
My dad always used to say, we'll stop for dinner on the way home.
Well,
if they serve Nouvelle Cuisine, we'll go to the fish and chip shop on the way home.
And there is an element of that, of course, because, a chef's dream of portion control. But much more importantly, it was about fresh ingredients and breaking the Escoffier rules, that you didn't have to have exactly the same.
Yes.
You didn't have to have applesauce with pork. You could have something else and so on. So
when you jumped forward again, so I'm going to drag you back to your arrival in London. Did you have entrepreneurial stroke culinary ambitions? Did you think with your French grounding I could turn this into a living? What would you have described as your ambition when you arrived here?
I wanted to have a restaurant.
You did already. So this was quite a crash course then. You went from being pretty much illiterate to being deeply passionate.
Very, very much so. And I became a crashing bore about it too.
I'm sure you didn't. Not in France.
Yeah, but I wanted to have a restaurant. But you can't have a restaurant when you've got no money and nobody will lend you any because you've no experience. So I went to the Cordon Bleu, did an advanced course there, and then I just started to cook people's dinners. I sort of running around London with a basket of ingredients in one, and knives and
word of mouth, relying on word of mouth, and a few
women women, posh women in Belgravia and Holland Park and places, who would hire me to do their dinner parties.
Right.
And then they
pretend they'd done it themselves, or
occasionally.
Okay, yes. And were other people doing that, or had you found a?
No, there were other people doing that, and I got my first job because somebody rang up the Cordon Bleu when I was there.
Okay.
And asked, because the teachers used to often cook for people's dinners in the evening. Quite a lot of the teachers made extra money by chefing at night. And so they didn't have a chef. So they sent a couple of us, two students who they thought were quite good students. So we went up to Highgate somewhere and cooked somebody's dinner. And I'll never forget it because I was so nervous. And we had 2 days. We had a day to prepare and then or an evening to prepare and then the next evening to cook it. And when I forget what we were paid, I think £2 each or something. And we spent it all on a taxi home because we were so exhausted. And
it's not a great business model, is it?
No.
We'll get on to business in a moment because I think it's a key part of your story, isn't it? The way the two went hand in hand, the entrepreneurial flair as much as the culinary flair. But you were so self-effacing when it came to drama and fine art. You were quite happy to concede your abject lack of talent. How did you, or when did you realise that you had a proper talent, a gift indeed for cookery and for food? And I don't want any modesty.
No, I won't. I'm not. I'm modest. I'm not. I think simply because every time I cooked somebody's dinner, almost every time, somebody who was at the dinner would contact the hostess and say, who cooked the dinner? And then I'd get another job and so forth. And I also realised I'm quite good at marketing.
Yes.
Because my husband always says this is the proof of my marketing. But when I was in Holland Park cooking a dinner, there was a hatch between the kitchen and the dining room. And I could hear the hostess talking, and somebody said, "This is delicious." And she said, "Yes, isn't it?" And then she said, can I have the telephone number of the girl in the kitchen? And she said, "Oh, no, she's just there for the washing up." She said, I always do my own cooking.
Oh, fantastic.
And I wanted to fling the doors out, open the hatch and say, hey, it was me. But I didn't. But what I did do is I put my little business card into every pocket of all the guests in the hall.
Oh, really?
In the coats hanging up, you see. And I wrote on the top of "Your dinner was cooked by." And one of those diners rang me up the next day, and he turned out to be a very posh guy called Lord Ryder, and he was the head of Reed Publishing. And he said, would I come and cook his, do some work for their company? And he became a good customer.
Gosh.
He became a good customer until I was cooking his wife's dinner party one day. And what I did not know, this is the trouble with overconfidence.
Yes.
I've always believed, if somebody says, would you like to cook something, and you've never cooked it, just say yes and then mug it up before you get there.
Okay.
Anyway, she said, when you get there, I'll do all the shopping. She said, when you get there, you just cook it. And when I got there was a pineapple and instructions to make a pineapple mousse. And I thought, well, I can make a lemon mousse, so I just
substitute the lemon for the pineapple.
Exactly, and it didn't set. And what I didn't know is papain is an enzyme which prevents setting.
Gosh.
So it was
pineapple soup.
It was a complete disaster.
You didn't style it out, pretend it was supposed to be soup.
I put it in glasses and pretended it was a sort of
straw
slush meant to be anyway, and. So she was very forgiving, and I said I didn't realise why it hadn't worked. I just thought there was something wrong with the gelatine or something. And so then she asked me to come again and do another dinner party. And blow me down, I got there was the same pineapple there. I did it twice because I had not learned. I hadn't gone back and thought, I've got to know why that didn't work. If I had cooked the pineapple, it would have been fine.
You've answered my next question. Is that because that would remove the enzyme that resists the gelling powers of the gelatine?
Exactly. I didn't know that, and I was too lazy or too busy or too ignorant.
So once
or too
was
young.
Forgivable, but twice was...
absolutely not.
No,
so that
I could see her point, actually, Prue.
Absolutely. It was justified loss of client.
But it didn't do you any lasting harm because...
No, it did me some good, because then I've been a bit more careful since.
Yes, yeah. You've never made a pineapple soup.
I never made a pineapple soup.
Never say never. So that became Leith's. Sorry.
No, but I have managed to. I remember at Leith's Restaurant, while we were jumping it forward, for some big festival, we decided to do a pineapple sorbet, and it's the same thing. It won't freeze, and you still get soup. And I managed to stop the chef making exactly the same.
That's almost the essence of cooking there, isn't it? It's trial and error, learning, registering, moving on, doing it differently next time.
Teaching somebody else.
And I think we can move to the restaurant, because the best part of a decade, what became Leith's Good Food, which was your sort of bespoke catering operation, gave you the reputation and presumably some funding as well, or at least enough of a reputation to secure funding to open Leith's, which right at the end of the 60s.
Yeah, 69. And I was 29 then. And I was determined to have a restaurant before I was 30, so I just managed it. And I knew nothing about the restaurant business. So it's overconfidence as usual. But I was hugely helped by the man who became my husband, who wasn't my husband at the time.
He was somebody else's husband
He was,
at the time. I know you have
so.
spoken about this.
Yes, he was somebody else's husband. In fact, he was my mother's best friend's husband, so that was not a good story. But anyway, I did fall in love with him, and we did. But at the time, everybody just thought he was my husband and my chairman, and sort of help and, wonderful sort of mentor, really. And he was very good at property, so he found the building that we had Leiths in, and then he rented me the.
I see. So he had the freehold, and you were doing the.
I just rented
in Kensington, on Kensington High Street, just off Kensington Park Road. Where what is now?
Where Core is now. Claire Smith's.
Yes, and you became quite a big noise very quickly.
Very quickly, and that was because I was very lucky because I was a woman doing this. I got much more publicity than I would have if it was a man.
Yes,
and because of my husband's wife's connections in the theatre and my mother being in the theatre, a lot of theatrical people came. So quite famous people started to come. And that always helps with the
became a destination, didn't it?
Yeah,
it became
and it was very fashionable.
It was, yes. And then, oddly, the stuff...
The food was terrible, by the way.
Of course it wasn't terrible. Why do you say that?
Well, I mean, I suppose...
You got a Michelin star.
Yes, I did, but not for 25 years.
Well, practice makes perfect.
No, but at the beginning, I mean, partly it was just that it was good for the time.
Okay.
But, people thought we were absolutely fantastic because we served fresh vegetables. And we didn't... The reason we served fresh vegetables mostly, well, one of the reasons was because I didn't have any money for a freezer. So we didn't have a freezer.
You have daily deliveries.
So we had daily deliveries. And... we did very simple sort of country house cooking. It wasn't the sort of posh restaurant cooking, and that was popular. We did whole roast duck and things like that, and the first courses were all like an Italian antipasta, lots of different salads and different things that you can, pâtés and mousses and things that you could choose, and puddings were on a glorious calorie fest, cream and stuff. But when I think now of some of the dishes we did a sort of lobster thermidor, which is just. I mean, I think
this is, as you say, though, it's very much of the time, isn't it? Very much of the time.
Yeah.
And by '95, you were turning over about £15 million a year, and you and your by now husband decided to sell up and move on. Yeah. Everything but the restaurant. You kept the restaurant, but the whole of the rest of the empire was. You cashed in your chips.
Yeah,
so
we
to
did
speak.
cash in our chips, but for two good reasons. One was that Rain was heading for 70.
Yes.
And I was heading for 50. But the main reason was that I was really fretting that I was never going to be able to write the novel that was buzzing around in my head.
Right.
I'd written 12 cookbooks. I'd worked a lot as a cookery correspondent or doing travel pieces for.
You did a tour of Fleet Street, really, didn't you? You wrote for almost everybody reputable.
4 years, it seems to me, that I could manage 4 years I did 4 years.
4 years cycles.
4 years in the Guardian, 4 years in the Sunday
else.
Express, 4 years somewhere else. So I did.
You just recycle all the recipes, can't you? If you move from one paper to another.
Because food changes so fast. You've got to keep. It's a fashion business.
I know. I'm being facetious.
So I couldn't do that. But
so the novel's bubbling away in the back of your mind, and there's something there, isn't there, that takes us right back to that combination of art and drama and storytelling, and that clearly, even though you'd not found your oeuvre as a younger woman, it wasn't going to be the stage, it wasn't going to be the canvas, but you did feel the need to tell stories, and so the plan was. The restaurant was running itself pretty much by now. You would move to the Cotswolds and write novels.
No, I wanted to sell the business because I realised because everything was the catering company was the biggest part of the business. There was the school by then,
which was hugely iconic. Still is, in fact, still carries your name.
Yeah, and still very, very good school.
Yes, my daughter was there last week.
Oh, really? Good. Well, all of this meant that I was running a little group which employed 500 people and was all embracing. It was very, very full on. And so I thought, I will never write this novel if I don't give up the business and stop writing cookery.
So you had to completely clear the slate.
But it sort of fitted because of my husband's age and the fact that I just felt, it would be nice to be at home writing a bit. So that's what I did. I just sold everything.
And it worked.
And it worked. And then for 25 years I wrote novels.
Yes.
And then,
which people perhaps don't realise, because your name stayed so front and centre, even though you were no longer part of the programme. I did the name Prue Leith during that 25-year period. It's essentially my adult life. And the name Prue Leith was still synonymous with cookery. And I'd walk past the restaurant on Kensington.
Which is quite surprising, because I really wasn't in it much.
No, that's what surprised me when I was preparing to meet you today. And then, of course, we come to we'll talk about the latest book, not least because you have, your daughter is adopted. And the trilogy that you've now completed hinges on adoption, doesn't it? So that presumably is not a coincidence.
No, I don't think it is. There were two themes that I wanted to get, apart from the usual ones. I always write love stories, and they're always got something to do with food. But I was very interested to have as a background to this trilogy the fact that how food has changed over the years from rationing to today. And it is an amazing story. But I also wanted to do something about adoption, because I think it's completely fascinating.
Yes,
you're adopted, aren't you?
I am,
yeah.
And it is fascinating. It's often a lot more fascinating to people whose families aren't connected to.
And also people have so many misconceptions about it.
Completely. I was once asked how naughty I'd have to be before my mum and dad would send me back. I was about 8 years old. I went home and said to Mum, "You're not going to send me back." But that's the kind of thing you mean.
Yes,
these curious confusions.
And people have my hero's story. In the first book, he's given up for adoption at birth. That happened a lot after the war, far more than people realise.
Yes.
That there was an enormous percentage. I think they estimated at least a third of children born in 1946 were illegitimate, and a lot of them would have been illegitimate and nobody knew, because the family would accept them, and sort of they'd be adopted by the mother or the sister or something. But so enormous amount of hidden adoptions, and so my hero disappears out of the novel right at the beginning of the first novel, when the couple who the novel is all about give him up. And then he comes back in the third novel. And what interests me, and I only found this out because of my husband having been adopted, and he happens to be about the same age as the hero in this book. So 20 years ago, about it would be, my hero starts looking for his birth parents. And in those days, which is what I got from John, there was an organisation called NORCAP, which was the National Organisation for the Reconciliation of Parents and Children or something. And that organisation knew exactly how to find people. They would dig around in the records, and then they would narrow it down to a few people with the right name and the right siblings and so forth. And then they would write them a letter. And the letter would be roughly, does this date mean anything to you? Which would be the date of the birth, of the giving away of the child. And because I have a friend who would very much like to meet you if you are the right person.
Quite a bombshell,
and of course,
isn't
the
it?
immediate reaction of these women to whom this happens is, oh my God, all that guilt comes back of I've given up my child.
Yes.
They feel immediately guilty, terrified that the child has gone off the rails as a result of being abandoned, or they have no idea how the child's been brought up.
Yes.
Because in those days you weren't allowed to know.
No.
You weren't allowed no contact.
Break.
It was an absolute clean break. So, and then their next thought is, I bet they want money. And I haven't got any.
Yes.
Or I haven't got enough. So the answer is always, don't know what you're talking about. The date means nothing to me.
Never bother me again.
Don't contact me again. By the way, I don't have any money.
Yeah.
And that's it.
Gosh.
And of course, then obviously, then for the mother, there's the what have I done?
Yes.
That person might be not screwed up. It might be really loving and might And a lot of them have wanted to know what's happened to their children all this time. So there's a huge emotional...
It's an astonishing sort of pivot, an emotional pivot. And I mean, we won't do any spoilers or anything like that, but the Lost Son, which is the final volume in the trilogy, does also address one of the things which, as an adopted person, you do wonder about if you did track down your biological mother, which I haven't done, whether you'd actually be setting off hand grenades in her life, because you don't know how much of her life now knows about the baby that she gave up 40 odd years ago.
So you have to be really careful. And in fact, there are good charities now that help you do it too.
And they do it in a much more sensitive fashion.
Anyway, it's
all in there.
But I'm so fascinated by adoption anyway, because my daughter is adopted, and she's Cambodian. And when I adopted her, which was 44 years ago, it was comparatively easy. I mean, they came and checked us out in 5 seconds. And, well, not in 5 seconds.
No, but I understand what you mean. Now you'd have to jump through all manner of hoops.
And now Lida has been 4 years trying to adopt, and she's finally last week got a baby.
Oh, how exciting.
Very exciting.
Well, I didn't know that. Well, obviously I didn't know that. That's magnificent. The bit that many people listening and watching this will only be aware of your latterly success on, well, not just Bake Off, but TV in general. So, I mean, it's almost as if you'd achieved one career, you then gave that up to follow a dream. The dream came true, and then you accidentally ended up being a TV star.
I know. You know, if the sword of Damocles fell on my head today, it would be a fair cop. I mean, I have had such a good life. Yes. I mean, I had a happy childhood. I had 2 really happy marriages. I mean, I hope I haven't finished. I've only just started.
It was still a work in progress.
yes, the work in progress only started 3 years ago. So I hope that'll be but I absolutely adore him, so that's fine. And I've got healthy children and a good career and enough money. I mean, really, it's so smug. I can absolutely understand.
You don't come across as smug.
People ought to hate me.
Well, no, the last guest was Ken Clark, actually, and he was at great pains to stress how lucky he had been. And I think, like you, if you acknowledge the luck, then it's a great... It diffuses any smugness.
But I am. I mean, I really do wake up thinking, God, not every day, obviously, but I do sometimes think... It is just unbelievable that I have been so
It hasn't
lucky.
happened by accident, has it? You put in quite a lot of effort.
I put in a lot of work, and I think doggedness helps.
Yes, clearly.
I'm quite dogged. I tend to be very upbeat about things, but if they go wrong, I either think, you know what, that was a good idea, I'll give it another shot. Or, you know what, it was a rotten idea, I should move on and find something else to do.
You either cook the pineapple or you don't.
Yeah, exactly.
So how have you found the different brand of fame? Because your name was famous up until the TV, and now your face is famous as well, in a way that perhaps it wasn't when you were writing your cookbooks or your novel.
Indeed. I know, that is surprising. And it's a whole new set of people. I mean, if you talk to anybody under 40, they have no idea I've ever done anything except Bake Off, because I haven't done visibly anything except Bake Off, except very recently.
Yes.
So they're always amazed that first of all, that I've lived so long. But anyway.
Well, they've done so much, I think, is the way.
Done so much.
Yeah.
But I actually love it. You know,
Clearly.
I'm just egotistical enough and vain enough to really enjoy the fact that people stop me in the street and say, can I have a selfie? You know, I feel so flattered. It's lovely.
Of course it is.
I really like it. But I would hate to have the kind of fame that would inhibit you doing anything. I mean, you know, if I walk out of the BBC, there might be a couple of people. There always are these people who want your signature. But I can normally walk all over the place without...
And you brought... It's a happy
and
fame.
It's very happy.
It's you know...
People, they don't want to abuse me yet.
No, well, I'm sure they never will.
I mean,
but I suppose if there was going to be any tension at all, it would have been the fact that you took over a berth on a programme that had already achieved an enormous amount of success, and you were a like-for-like swap with Mary Berry, weren't you? Presumably you'd known over the years, had you?
Yes, I have. I've known her for years,
My wife told me that I had to say, I'm going to be very embarrassed to say this out loud, we think you're much better than Mary Berry.
I can't say that.
I've said it now, not just on Bake Off, but the cookbooks as well. My wife's written a couple, but nothing on your scale, and my daughter loves your books. And actually, Lucy did for the Mail a comparison when you got the job. I don't know if you saw it. She did a comparison for the Mail thumbnail on Sunday of your cookbooks versus Mary Berry's cookbooks, and it's a knockout, Prue. We had to end the fight humanitarian reasons.
I'm actually a great Mary fan.
Of course, I'm not suggesting.
And I do, yeah. But anyway, but you must
have thought twice about stepping into such big and well-established shoes.
I didn't think twice about it.
No, just thought this looks like fun.
I didn't think twice about it. But what happened was when Mary said she was going to stay with the BBC and she wasn't going to go over. It did cross my mind that, gosh, it would be nice to get that job.
Why? Why would you fancy that?
Just because I thought it would be up my street. I spent a lot of time judging my student stuff at Leith's, and that was much more difficult because there were 96 of them doing the same exam, and they had to do five courses, and I'd have to judge them all. You see, one of them took 3 days. It was really hard work.
Clearly.
And I thought, all Mary has to do is walk on, eat cake, walk off, go and sit back in the green room.
Looks like
it's
fun.
bliss.
Yes.
You see, so I thought, I'd like to do that. And but then I thought, I just dismissed it. I thought, no, the new organisation, the Channel 4, they won't want another old lady. They'll want a, sort of handsome young guy or something. Yes. And so I was quite surprised when they rang, but I didn't hesitate. I just said, yes, I'd love it. And then I had to, they didn't say, would you like the job? They said, would you like to put your hat in the ring?
Yes.
So I said, yes, still thinking, well, it won't really happen. And especially when I heard that Darina Allen might be up for it.
Right.
Which is all gossip, but I don't know if it was true, but I think it probably is. Because I thought she was perfect for it. Anyway, so
you got the nod.
And I think it was really Paul Hollywood who cast me, because, it's important that whoever...
there has to be chemistry and warmth.
Yes, so we had to get on.
Genuinely.
And when we were doing our audition, he said to me, don't just stand there listening to me, get in there. He was sort of encouraging me. And I thought, that's interesting, because I was just sort of gobsmacked in admiration, because he never hesitates.
He's a screen natural, but again, he came to TV very late. I mean, he was already successful and established.
Baker, yeah.
And so there it is.
He's so good at what he does, and he was...
and you love it, clearly, because you couldn't fake that on screen. No, well, maybe you could, actually. No, you couldn't, because you're a rubbish actress.
I'm a rubbish actress. I couldn't fake it.
So that will continue. You're going to carry on doing that.
I hope so, as long as they'll have me.
I can't see any prospect of them not in the near future. The novels, you've finished a trilogy, but you haven't finished writing.
Do you know, I wish I could say for sure I have.
You just have to wait to see if something... it's a story you feel the need to tell.
Exactly. I mean, I think of writing as a sort of disease. You've either got it or you haven't. And I almost always, when I finished a book before, it's within 2 weeks I've been fiddling with a new one.
Okay.
And this time, I mean, the trilogy was really hard to do, because there are just too many characters, and it's such a organizational thing, and you're worrying about, that you mustn't say something in book 3 that would
contradict something in book 1. Yes.
So just technically it was difficult to write, and it took longer because I was doing Bake Off and other stuff, and so I was really pleased to see the back of the last book, especially as it came back from my editor twice for rewrites. First of all, it had too much food in it, and not enough sex, and then it had too much business in it. So then by the time everybody was happy and I was happy, I was really relieved. And then I've been rather pleased. I mean, yesterday I actually spent the day sort of baking. So
it's liberating. You don't have an itch that you feel the need to scratch. Itch. But I sense, having met you for the first time an hour ago, I sense that if we were to be 6 months or 12 months hence...
I might be writing something.
But also you might be wanting the itch. You might be worried that the itch isn't there.
Oh, no, I don't know about that. I just hope the itch won't come back. But if it does, I would like it to come back in the form of short stories or something that I can manage better.
Well, we look forward to that. Prue Leith, what an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.